Bill, Madam Toastmaster, welcome, fellow Toastmasters and guests. Black America saved Cadillac. Black America saved Cadillac how? Well, the story is fascinating, and I'd love to share that with you, and I'll tell you exactly how that happened. Let's go back in time a little bit. Let's go back to the early 1900s. In 1903, the United States, there were 57 automobile manufacturers, 57. By 1928, there were 25. The rest went bankrupt. One of them to survive was Cadillac. Now, how did Cadillac survive? What happened? It was 1928. It was start of the Great Depression. But things were turning. Things started to decline, but they were also turning. How did Cadillac actually get formed? Did you know that Henry Ford had a connection to the Cadillac car company? Henry Ford actually had 3 car companies. The first one, it went bankrupt. Total disaster, failure. He sold the assets, got rid of it. The second was actually a luxury car company that he started that also went belly up. But another gentleman by the name of Henry Leland bought it over from him and named it Cadillac. The third is what we all know and love today, the Ford Motor Company. Now, interesting enough, Henry Leland, he really didn't do the work. He named it Cadillac, but he hired 2 brothers to come on board and actually run the company, run the business for him. And it actually rose with their involvement year and year and year in. Those brothers were the Dodge brothers. Henry Leland didn't want anything to do with them. He cut them out of the business. And in 1919, as Cadillac rose to success, he cut those brothers out. They went and started the Dodge company, the Dodge brothers, and they sold it. And he sold it, Henry Leland sold it to GM. Progressively, with GM's involvement and with all of their brands, Cadillac started to become the prestigious, luxurious, gorgeous brand that it is today. Some loved it and drooled over it. Gas guzzling machines the size of tennis courts. In 1928, GM was selling 42,000 Cadillacs a year, 42,000. But it turned. By 1933, with the rise of the Great Depression, was the fall of luxury products in America. Cadillac went from 42,000 vehicles a year to an 85% reduction to 6,000 vehicles a year. 6,000. This was in the late 1933. It was the Great Depression. People didn't have money. It was famine. Luxury brands were not interested. Unemployment was rampant. It was a tough time for the economy, and so was for Cadillac. Late around this time, December 1933, the executives of Cadillac were sitting around and were like, all right, we're all about profits, we're all about growth, and this isn't working out. It's time to cut our losses and shut this company down. In 1933, the executives were sitting around their tables making a decision to shut down Cadillac when one of their very own knocked on their executive boardroom door and said, I think I have an idea. I think I can save Cadillac. This was Nicholas Drestad. He was their national service manager for all of Cadillac across the nation. The executives were like, who are you? Why are you here? Like, get out of here. One of the executives said, hey, hold on. Let's hear what he has to say. Well, Nicholas said, do you realize we don't sell to anybody else besides white Americans? And you know, in the South, Black Americans are paying $300 cash, back then, $300 cash over and above sticker price to white Americans to buy the vehicle for them. And Black Americans were the ones that were actually driving around all the entertainers, the elites, the judges, the politicians, all of them. And they wanted to be in a Cadillac. And that was the only way they could get a Cadillac, was to pay cash over and above. The executive says, well, what do we got to drive? What do we got to lose? Nicholas said, why don't we start looking at selling directly and targeting our sales to Black Americans? They gave it a go. And in 1934, Cadillac was one of the first car companies to actually create a program targeting their sales practices directly to Black Americans. They opened up their dealerships They created new sales programs. They invited Black Americans to come in and buy their vehicles. Black Americans loved it. They felt free, they felt open, they felt welcome. They bought so many Cadillacs in 1934, sales soared 70% and continued year and year and year after that. Now you ask yourself, this was 1934. People didn't have money. People didn't have a job. There were breadlines. There were famine. We read all. But how did Cadillac survive? How did Black Americans have the money to pay? You couldn't get a car loan. Car loans didn't exist back then. Banks didn't have money. They collapsed. You had to pay cash. Well, back then, the banks primarily supported deposits and funding and lending to white Americans, not primarily to Black Americans. When the banks collapsed, all of those who invested lost along with it. Black Americans had their cash with them in the South, and they invested in Cadillac. They spent their money in Cadillac. They felt welcome. They spent it. They grew it, and Cadillac grew along with it. And Cadillac did not stop there. Their integrated sales practices, they were one of the first companies in 1935, 1939 to actually incorporate Black American products into Cadillac. They created a design and style team with Black Americans and also incorporated Black Americans onto their operations and production teams. A fully integrated process from sales to production to design to style to products, incorporating diversity and Black Americans into it. Now, many people have realized the stereotypes and understand the stereotypes between Cadillac and Black Americans, but the reality is Black Americans saved that car company. They saved Cadillac, and Cadillac is here today because of them. And now you know. Thank you.